According to a new report in the Wall Street Journal today, it's Saturday, November 29th, Trump is pushing a business deal rather than a peace deal. And people in Trump's orbit stand to make a lot of money if the business deal, peace deal with Russia goes through as it's structured right now. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Let's get to what's going on in Ukraine first. Yermac, as you know, just resigned. He says, quote, "I'm going to the front lines and I'm ready for any pressure. I'm an honest and decent person. I was humiliated and my dignity was not protected, although I've been in Kyiv since February 24th, 2022. You remember that image of Zelensky standing there with his cell phone saying, "I'm here and the prime minister's here and the head of the office," right? Yermac was right there just over his left shoulder. And so, okay, he's saying he's going to go to the front line. Therefore, I don't want to create any problems for Zelensky. Okay, that's where we are with Yermac. Yermac's out. But opponents of Ukraine are making hay about this. It's highly likely that billions in the U.S. aid to Ukraine ended up in private Swiss accounts on top of Zelensky's aides, says Laura Ingraham. Laura Ingraham is a host on Fox News. She has, I think, the 10 o'clock time slot, which is a pretty coveted, it's either 9 or 10 o'clock time slot. And yeah, what a racket. 220 billion spent. Okay, so it's just giving ammunition to people who already don't like Ukraine to pile on. Kirill Dmitriev is saying new Zelensky's closest ally, Yermak, head of the Ukrainian presidential office and Ukraine's number 2. Well, it's not you. The head of the presidential office is not Ukraine's number 2. Resigns after an anti-corruption raid on his home and widening corruption investigation. And so he's posting this of Endgame, the title from Time. Okay. Yeah, again, they're just going to pile on. And that's already on piling on other things that were going on before the corruption scandal. And so here's Tucker Carlson talking about how Zelensky's a bad actor. He's a dictator. He's not the elected president of Ukraine. He is the elected president of Ukraine. This is a willful misunderstanding of what the Ukrainian constitution allows. He is methodically trying to eliminate traditional Christianity from Ukraine. Like he's going to go on. So it doesn't matter that this is not true. What matters is that they're going to pile on when they can pile on. And this just gave them the opportunity. Why did Yermak resign now? Well, this is the former head of the Treasury in Ukraine and Timothy Milovanov, and he's also well, let's just hear what he has to say.
I think that's the only right move given the domestic political crisis, and it will strengthen President Zelensky rather than weaken him. Of course, it takes dignity on the part of Andrei Yermak, and I messaged him and thanked him for his service. He has not been implicated, but there is a fight, there is a perception, there is a question of transparency and accountability. And after today's raid of the law enforcement in his offices, which, by the way, is historically unprecedented in Ukraine, never before we could have imagined that our law enforcement agencies would be so independent and so powerful. But this is a sign of internal struggle, internal cleaning, internal fighting with corruption. I think it's the worst possible moment for this, given the negotiations. But I think it's also a sign of Ukraine being able to move on and institutions working.
Yeah, so it is a sign that the democratic process is cleaning house where it needs to be cleaning house in Ukraine, even though it's a really bad look at this particular point. Okay, Christopher Miller from Financial Times posted, "This might be one of the greatest and most telling quotes I've gotten as a reporter. Quote, I don't want to dance on his grave," his being Yermak, "especially before making sure it is one." Wow, that's a chilling quote. I don't know what to make of that. Zelensky has approved Ukraine delegation for upcoming talks with the U.S., replacing Yermak as head of the NSDC, Secretary Umerov. Now, I understand that the Americans like Umerov well enough. The top team includes top intelligence, military, diplomatic figures such as Budanov. Budanov has also been rumored to replace Yermak at the negotiations. this is Carol. He's a reporter from The Economist magazine. Carol notes that negotiations are continuing, that Donald Trump, against the backdrop of Ukraine's corruption scandal, is effectively pushing the sides toward an unequal peace that favors Moscow. There's a reason why, and I'm going to talk about that reason why in just a moment. I don't think Budanov is going to take the top post here as far as the negotiations, but he's well liked in the United States. Yermac, on the other hand, was not. Yermac's resignation came after months of mounting foreign frustration with the head of the office of the president, according to the Telegraph. American officials across both parties have long viewed Yermac as abrasive and obstructive. One insider reportedly called him a bipartisan irritator. Okay. His role in arranging the disastrous Oval Office meeting with Trump and his decision to show Trump disturbing images of starving Ukrainian POWs badly damaged Kyiv's standing in Washington. I think Yermac was trying to do the right thing, trying to, like, if he could only see this, not realizing that that's not going to move Trump. After that meeting, Trump officials asked Zelensky to fire him, citing both diplomatic mishandling and the fact that Yermac required an English translator. European allies were also believed to have pushed Zelensky to let Yermac go, worried that his growing power, abrasive style, and links to the scandal threatened unity and accountability within Ukraine's leadership at a critical moment. In the end, foreign diplomats saw Yermac as a politically toxic figure who jeopardized Western support. I think that's probably fair. Whether he's corrupt or not, I don't know. It looks like it's probable that there's something there, but I don't know exactly what. So I'm not going to speculate until I have facts. Okay. Meanwhile, again, Russia's paid influencers are out there in a big way, not just talking about Yermac, but all kinds of things. Here we see aiming to convince Western audiences that Russia's about to win the war at any moment so that the U.S. has to do what Putin wants. Here's George Galloway from Great Britain. The Russians could be, listen to this, could be in Kyiv by Christmas. Huh? I mean, is that likely at all? I'm going to show you this in a second. At the pace they're advancing, they could be certainly by Orthodox Christmas. That's in January. But I don't believe that they want to be. That they want to be. What? They just don't want to do it because they're just nice. They just, yeah. Okay. This, I'm going to show this image every day. This image here, this is what Russia has taken, just as red, these little pieces in red. That's what Russia's taken in 2025. That's all that they've been able to conquer in 2025. So that should tell you that they probably can't go from there to Kyiv. Kyiv's out here by Christmas or even Orthodox Christmas. That's just nuts. Okay, a small reminder, Ukrainians are not fighting for Zelensky. They are fighting for their right to live, for their freedom, for their dignity. This is from Euromaidan Press. Since 2014, they have been fighting a war on two fronts against Russia's genocidal killers and their own corrupt officials. So no, successful raids by Ukrainian anti-corruption fighters are not a sign of weakness. Actually, just the opposite. They demonstrate the strength of institutions even during times of great hardship. Institutional strength, which, alas, isn't all guaranteed, even in the freest of nations, as current events suggest. Whoever takes success in the fight against corruption as a pretext for demanding concessions to the Russian mafia state is part of the problem. That's right. And think about it. Frame this the way that it should be framed. Think about this in the big picture. This was just a victory for the institution, for Ukraine, for anti-corruption. Even though it's a terrible look, it was still a victory. And we have to think about it in that way. All right, let's continue. The U.S. is ready to recognize Russia's control over Crimea and other occupied territories as part of a potential agreement, according to the Telegraph. I don't know that that's necessarily so. I know the Telegraph is saying it, but I haven't seen the actual document saying it yet. But Gary Kasparov says if the U.S. recognizes territory taken by force, just replace leader of the free world with for sale. Xi can come up with more cash than Putin for Trump and his pals to do the same thing for Taiwan. Here we see this isn't about Zelensky. It isn't even about Ukraine. It's about preserving the entire post-1945 international order. You just can't help yourself to a slice of another's country. I mean, it's just that easy. Okay, Ukraine's ex-president Yushchenko slammed the U.S.-Russia peace plan as betrayal like Munich 1938. He says America must stand by the nations that trusted its promises, reminding that Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1994 based on American and Russian guarantees. And yet here we are. Okay, so let's look at what's going on in the United States. And there's a couple of things. The smallest issue is Venezuela. Trump just posted this on Truth Social a little while ago. Trump has announced the closure of Venezuelan airspace to all airlines, pilots, drug dealers, human traffickers. Please consider the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela to be closed in its entirety. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald Trump. Well, that's rankling the feathers of Europeans who are saying, "Hey, how is he doing this? This is," and they're condemning Trump for Venezuela, and that's got a reaction from Rubio. Rubio saying, "I don't think that the European Union gets to determine what international law is, and they certainly don't get to determine how the United States defends its national security. The United States is under attack from organized criminal narco T in our hemisphere, and the president is responding in the defense of our country. Keep crying, globalist traitors," is what the commentary was saying here beneath the Rubio's statement. Okay, so let's ignore the commentary here and just look at what Rubio had to say. And yeah, like, this is just not the best look for Europeans to be saying right now when they could be saving their ammunition for things about Ukraine. It's not a good look for Americans with this either. I mean, with whatever's about to go down with Venezuela. So, okay, at any rate, Christopher Miller posted this. He's from the Financial Times. European diplomats asked Driscoll, that is the Secretary of the Army, a friend of J.D. Vance, in Kyiv, whether the U.S. saw accountability for Russia's war crimes as an essential part of the plan. He deflected, much to their chagrin. Echoing Vance, Driscoll said, quote, "There are cities, locations under dispute that will be in Russian hands. It's just a matter of time. If we don't recognize that, then the decision to fight must weigh. How many lives are you willing to sacrifice? The deal does not get better from here. It gets worse." So if Driscoll is a replacement for Keith Kellogg, it's a terrible replacement. And this seems to be the substitute in the meantime. Okay, the big story was this in the Wall Street Journal: "Make money, not war, Trump's real plan for peace." This is in the Wall Street Journal today. So Jane Kyiv talks about a stunning level of corruption from the Trump administration on the Russia-Ukraine deal laid out in this extensive Wall Street Journal article. Everyone around Trump is getting something from Putin in exchange for forcing Ukraine to surrender. So, for example, Beach, Trump Jr.'s college friend, was in talks to acquire 9.9% of an Arctic liquefied natural gas project with Novatek, Russia's second largest natural gas producer, which is partly owned by Timchenko, if the U.S. and U.K. remove sanctions on it, according to drafts of contracts reviewed by the Journal. So parties are standing to benefit, and so foreign policy is being confused or overlaid on business deals, and that becomes very problematic, self-dealing. Witkoff suggested that Ukraine should give up the idea of receiving long-range Tomahawk missiles and instead push for a 10-year exemption from tariffs. Okay, this was reported by the Wall Street Journal. The special envoy's argument was simple: what good can a handful of missiles do? In his view, a long period without tariffs would give Ukraine's economy a far greater and longer-term benefit than a one-off batch of weapons. That's the way that Witkoff thinks about the war. Again, in the Wall Street Journal, this is Don Bacon reacting to it, multi-billion business deals between Russian and American billionaires that forces Ukraine to give Russia more land and make Ukraine a Russian vassal state. Greed trumps Ukrainian sovereignty. Churchill and Reagan are turning in their graves. Yeah, I can see that. There's even memes out now showing them taking off jackets and turning into Russian agents, right? I mean, this is the kind of, we've gotten to the meme phase at this point. All right. When Putin is defending you, you're on the wrong side. When Russia spends billions to help Trump win the election, the U.S. electorate should have understood, but they didn't. Putin defends Witkoff against that. That's just commentary from Jane Kyiv. But here's the headline: Putin defends Witkoff against accusations of pro-Russia bias. The Russian leader calls the U.S. special envoy an intelligent man who is properly representing his country in peace negotiations by telling them what to do or how to say things so that they can appeal to Trump. That's what they're doing. Okay. Now, here's a reaction in The Guardian talking about how Europe is going, we got to wake up, guys. Washington's Putin appeasing plan for peace in Ukraine has failed, but many heard death knell sounded for European reliance on U.S. protection. So just a few paragraphs in here I want to show you. Depressingly for Europe, this means that no matter how frequently it manages to push the Trump pendulum away from Russia, the pendulum reverts back to a natural position of sympathy for Putin. But never until the emergence of the 28-point U.S.-Russian plan to end the war and the subsequent revelation that Witkoff had apparently coached the Russian officials on how to win the Trump round, or win Trump round, had European leaders seen precisely how U.S. officials envisioned a new European order in which Russia, in the name of realism, is rewarded. Okay, that's important. In the name of realism. Well, this is the way the world works. It's just going to, this is what we're going to do. This, right, is rewarded. Once again, blindsided by Trump, European leaders read paragraph after paragraph of the U.S. proposal with a mixture of disbelief and panic. Just a little bit further down, 3 factors helped European rescue operation when they were trying to revise this 28-point plan. First, the draft was so lopsided and so prescriptive about Europe's security as to be indefensible. Rather than substitute an alternative, which is what they started to do with a 24-point plan, the Europeans chose instead to gut the Witkoff project, which made it a baseline, which I don't really like, but okay. I mean, there's a couple ways you can do this. Making Trump's plan the starting point was intended to avoid antagonizing the Americans. It acknowledged Trump's efforts as legitimate. Secondly, the disputes within the U.S. administration could no longer be concealed, principally the feud between Vance and Rubio. This helped the Atlanticist wing of the Senate, already worried about the president's plunging polling ratings, to rediscover its backbone and voice. Okay, so the Reagan Republicans who were like me going, wait a minute, what are you doing? They started to sound off, and I showed you that the other day. That in turn led to Vance, J.D. Vance, to make some ill-tempered assaults on Congress. There's an illusion that simply giving more money, more weapons, or imposing more sanctions will bring victory within reach. Peace will not be achieved by failed diplomats or politicians living in a fantasy world. It could be achieved by intelligent people living in the real world, he said. Again, that realist wing. Finally, Europe maintained its unity mercifully. This is the last line of defense in my estimation is European unity holding together. Despite petty rivalries about the roles of France, Germany, and Britain, the Europeans held together. So that's at least good. U.S. officials were not always aware of the details of the negotiations between Steve Witkoff and Kirill Dmitriev, according to the Wall Street Journal. According to those reports, negotiations between Dmitriev and Witkoff lasted 9 months. Officials from Sanctions Control Division of the U.S. Treasury often learned of the details of these meetings from the British counterparts. How about that? Ahead of planned Russia-U.S. summit in Alaska in August, Dmitriev and Witkoff discussed a possible prisoner exchange. The CIA and State Department were not fully informed about these exchange talks. A few days after the summit in Anchorage, the EU Intelligence Situation Center sent a report to several senior European national security officials. According to the newspaper, the contents of the document shocked European officials as it described commercial, that is business deals, and economic plans the U.S. was pursuing jointly with Russia. Among them was a project for extracting rare earth metals in the Arctic. Okay, so, I mean, this is just... they're looking at the business deals rather than peace deals for the reasons that peace deals should be made. Okay. Meanwhile, Russia's Arctic program is collapsing under sanctions. Russia's plan to build new icebreakers has fallen apart because replacing foreign components turned out to be far too expensive. The project was originally designed with imported parts, but sanctions have made it impossible to buy them. So lack of access to key technologies is derailing major state programs and forcing Russia to scale down its Arctic ambitions. Okay, now this is satire, but Sir William Browder posted this and said, this is satire, but it's fitting in the new world that we live in. Again, it's satire, I stress that. In a surprise statement that left diplomats choking on their coffee, Ursula von der Leyen reportedly announced that the EU is open to recognizing Alaska as Russian territory if it helps settle the whole Crimea thing once and for all. Look, the Americans barely use the place except for reality TV and bears, she allegedly said, shrugging as if she were trading Pokemon cards and not chunks of sovereign land. Now, the absurdity of that is the same absurdity that we're seeing when the Americans are thinking about potentially recognizing Russian-occupied Ukrainian lands as Russian. Okay. Trump announced that he is canceling all. Now, this is a different story altogether, but just shows you the kinds of things that are going on in the United States. Trump announced that he is canceling all of Biden's auto pen signed executive orders. Is this some kind of scandal? No. Any president can do that to any other executive orders. A new president can come in and sign one executive order saying all of Biden's executive orders are canceled. And then the next president can say all of Trump's executive orders are canceled, because the executive order is not a law as much as it is a sub-administrative function of law that allows you to, within the laws, do this or that or the other thing. And any president has that right or ability to do that. So there's no scandal here. I know some people might be talking about that, but I'm just set that aside. Okay, Trump's son has unveiled a new vodka brand, apparently for important negotiations with the Russians. It's called Trump Vodka. I guess they're trying to win over Dmitry Medvedev. Okay, now here I want to highlight this because this is the way that Trump has made his money. He made his name synonymous with luxury brands, and then he licenses his name out instead of doing it like he's not like making vodka or anything. He's just licensing his name out, I'm pretty sure, to a vodka company that puts Trump on a label and then charges a premium price. Okay, last little bit, a shout out to Captain George, graduate student, YouTube member. Thank you, Captain George. I appreciate it. I saw this yesterday and I thought, that's really interesting. Just the timing was just stunning because Putin was Orban was in Moscow talking to Putin about inviting him to Budapest for a new peace summit, and Putin said, "Sure, I'll agree to that event, when the time comes." Okay, so Reagan has statues in Eastern Europe commemorating his opposition to Russian imperialism. Trump appears to be hoping for a statue in Moscow commemorating his support for Russian imperialism. It's just, commentary, but it feels like that, right? Okay. Gary Kasparov said it must be the biggest and most golden Trump statue in front of the biggest casino in the biggest city, Moscow, in the biggest country, right? All paid for with Ukrainian blood. And that's the unfortunate thing. Now, I want to show you those statues, by the way. This is a Reagan monument in Warsaw, and it's dedicated to Reagan, and it's built on the Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. That's what this statue is commemorating in Warsaw. And then there's one here in Budapest, Hungary as well. The Budapest, Hungary one is a statue in Budapest Liberty Square, and the statue is to commemorate, for what Reagan did in the Cold War. Isn't that ironic? All right, my friends, thank you for your time, the likes, the shares, and the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.